조선의 10월입니다. 환희로운 경축의 밤입니다. 이 시각 저 멀리 조국 방선 하늘 땅 바다 초소의 미도운 장병들과 도시와 마을들, 굴지의 공장들과 협동벌, 탄광들과 광산, 어촌들과 교정들에서도 이 나라 천만 아들 딸들이 경건히 우러르며 마음 달려오는 여기 수도의 경축광장입니다. 영광과 자긍 넘치는 위대한 밤 10월 명절의 밤이거니 우리 얼마나 간관 경난들을 이기며 여기까지 왔던가. 더듬어 볼수록 추억 뜨겁고 새겨 볼수록 한없는 긍지의 가슴 부풀어 이 밤에로 달려온 길들을 돌이켜 봅니다. 역사의 한 시각이 한나라 한민족의 장래를 결정하기도 합니다. 해방 후 처음으로 맞이한 조선의 10월, 우리의 붉은 단기가 힘차게 나부끼기 시작한 역사의 그날이 찬란한 오늘을 안아왔습니다. 못 잊을 그날에 위대한 힘과 부흥으로 저놈 떨칠 내조국의 앞날이 기약됐습니다. 전변의 시대, 전환의 시대, 강국의 시대, 참으로 영광스러운 75년이 흘렀습니다. 허나 그 길에는 조국과 혁명 인민의 운명을 지켜 피와 눈물과 고뇌를 걸음걸음 찍으며 약진의 대로를 한치 한치 열어간 우리 당의 천신만고가 역력히 새겨져 있습니다. 그래서 이 밤을 밝히는 저 밝음에 우리 당이 해쳐온 세월의 모진 눈비들이 비껴오고 천만 밤을 지새운 샹도의 그 불빛들이 오려와 우리 눈곱 뜨겁게 젖어드는 것이 아닙니까? 지셀 줄 모르는 열정의 밤은 위대한 힘으로 더 높이 솟구쳐 오를 내 조국의 찬란한 아침을 부르고 있습니다.
잠시 후 여기 수도 평양 김일성 광장에서는 조선노동당 창건 75돌 경축 열병식이 거행되게 됩니다. 오늘의 열병광장은 해방 후 정규적 혁명 무력의 탄생을 선포하던 역사의 그날, 마차에 기관총을 메우고 나아가던 청소한 우리 인민군대가 당의 령도 밑에 얼마나 거대한 힘을 비축하였는가를 감회 깊이 돌이켜보는 추억과 감동의 뜻깊은 장소로 될 것입니다. 이번 열병식에는 명예기병 상징 종대를 선두로 53개의 도보 종대와 22개의 기계화 종대, 총 75개의 열병 종대가 참가하게 됩니다. 열병 종대마다 지니고 있는 부대의 전통과 위훈을 합치면 당의 령도 따라 우리의 혁명적 무장력이 걸어온 자랑찬 승리의 역사가 될 것입니다. 기억도 생생합니다. 할아버지 세대로 불리우는 정규 무력의 첫 열병식 참가자들이 원자탄과 맞서야 했던 무기는 보병총에 불과했습니다. 그러나 오늘의 열병식에 참가하게 될 그들의 손자 세대는 너무도 변했고 누구도 상상 못할 힘을 가지고 세상에 그것을 과시하게 됩니다.
지금 이 시각 우리 당의 창건자이시며 건설자이신 위대한 수령 김일성 동지와 위대한 영도자 김정일 동지께서 경축광장을 굽어보시며 우리 모두에게 따뜻한 축복을 보내실 것입니다. 온 세계가 주체조선의 강대성이 힘있게 시위될 이 광장을 지켜보고 있을 것입니다. 1945년 10월 10일로부터 2020년 10월 10일 75성상 27,392일이 흘렀습니다. 우리 당이 조국과 인민을 이끌어 이 광장까지 오는 길은 결코 순탄치 않았습니다. 간관 초행길도 있었습니다. 불타는 강을 건널 때도 있었습니다. 폭풍치는 언덕에 나설 때도 있었습니다. 어찌하여 우리 당이 참기 어려운 고난 속에서도 정때 많은 억세게 들어줘야 했고 형언할 수 없는 도전 광풍에 부닥치면서도 전쟁 억제력을 다지고 또 다져야 했습니까? 이제 우리는 인민의 감 높은 지위와 존엄을 만대로 담보해 줄 억척의 지지점이 무엇이며 인민에게 줄 수 있는 사랑 중에 제일 큰 사랑이 과연 어떤 것인가를 위대한 어머니의 역사 속에서 뜨겁게 안아보게 됩니다. 지금 관중들의 환호 속에 오늘의 열병식 조악을 맡은 국무위원회 연주단과 조선인민군 군악단이 광장에 입장하고 있습니다.
Hi, good evening from Seoul. If you are tuning into this YouTube stream, my name is Chad O'Carroll. I'm the CEO of Korea Risk Group, which is the producer of NK News, a specialist North Korea-focused publication. We have been waiting for hours for this military parade to start. It's a very unusual set of circumstances today. Normally these military parades from North Korea are shown from about 9 a.m. till about 11:30 a.m. But today it appears that the parade took place very late night, maybe between midnight and 2 a.m. So this is a very special program today. We've not done this before, but after a suggestion from one of our readers, we thought it'd be good to bring together some of our analysts to make sense of the parade as it happens live. So we've got three guests with me today. I'll just ask them to introduce themselves quickly. Ankit Panda, do you want to introduce yourself? Just let people know who you are.
Sure, thanks, Chad. I'm Ankit Panda. I'm author of the recent book Kim Jong-un and the Bomb, Survival and Deterrence in North Korea, and a senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Happy to be here.
Great, and we've also got Jongmin Kim here.
Good evening, good morning, wherever you are. This is Jongmin Kim, Seoul correspondent in K News, and I'll be monitoring Kim Jong-un's post.
And we've also got from the Netherlands, Joost Ollemans. Would you like to introduce yourself, Joost?
Hi, Chad. I'm Joost, and together with my co-author, we just wrote a book on the North Korean armed forces, which is called North Korea's Armed Forces on the Path of Seung-gun. And I regularly write for a variety of websites and news agencies on the DPRK's armed forces.
Great, thanks everyone. So we're currently seeing what seems to be a mixture of video clipped together of various aspects of the parade. It's unclear yet if we're going to be seeing the full show or if this is a very polished, shortened production. Ankit, can you just tell us about the significance of today and like why so many people are interested in watching this parade, just to start out?
Sure. I mean, so we had a very good idea of what was happening with North Korea's nuclear forces in 2017, of course, when we were seeing strategic missile tests every couple of weeks, or at least what felt like every couple of weeks that year. And of course, the April 15th, 2017 military parade on Kim Il-sung's birthday, Day of the Sun, was unforgettable for a variety of reasons. I mean, it was the first time North Korea showed off as much as it had. We did get two parades since then, one in February 2018, which was also remarkable for including the Hwasong 15, their largest ever missile. And we got a much more modest parade in September 2018. While diplomacy was ongoing, North Korea effectively, quote, denuclearized that parade. It basically showed off no systems that were nuclear capable. This is the first parade really since February 2018, when we're expecting to see updates on what they've been working for. So a good chance to display qualitative and quantitative progress in expanding not only their nuclear forces, but their conventional forces. So I think there'll be a lot to see here. Certainly already we can tell that this is something that they've taken care to present with a particular aesthetic, given that it is taking place at night and looks really unlike any other North Korean parade I've ever seen so far.
Yeah, and so we were hearing from our sources in Pyongyang all through the day that they had heard fighter jets flying over Pyongyang sometime between 1 and 2 a.m. Sounds of heavy tanks, equipment moving around. And this also follows back on Tuesday earlier this week. We had similar reports that 3-4 a.m. people were woken up in the community of foreigners living in Pyongyang with the sounds of very loud noises of military equipment moving around. Youst, can you just give us some insight? Are parades at night common in the military world? And like, what do you think would motivate the North Koreans to parade at night?
I think they're not particularly common in the military world. I mean, your purpose is to show off whatever equipment you have and showcase it to the general public as well. Well, most people ordinarily wouldn't show up at night, of course. But in a country like North Korea, that's no problem, since you can just order most of your population to attend. But in the DPRK, we have had some parades in the past, like very small military defilades where just the vehicles were passing through quickly, but also massive torchlight parades, which were more civilian in nature. So they do have somewhat of a history with this, but a military parade of this scale, that's definitely unique.
Yeah, it's definitely strange. We have just heard from inside North Korea that at around 6:30 tonight, noises of fireworks could be heard, which could be related to the torch parades, which you mentioned earlier. We saw photos several weeks ago of large numbers of youth and children rehearsing for torch parades in Kim Il-sung Square in the center of the town. And usually those two events are segmented and separate. So we would have a military parade early in the day, followed by a torch parade later at night. And it could be that right now, though we're seeing this edited selection of video from early hours this morning, that the torch parade is actually going on as we speak in Pyongyang. Youst, is there any particular military equipment you're on the lookout at this particular parade? Anything that you've been tracking to see if it may emerge?
Well, there's definitely a couple of new pieces of equipment which either featured in few parades in the past or which are slated to feature during this one. That includes a whole host of ballistic missiles, which they tested in the 2018 period. But what I'm also spotting just directly from the few images we're seeing is that a lot of the personal equipment of KPA soldiers appears to have been upgraded quite a lot. So I think they're really going to go across the board on innovations this year.
What kind of upgrades have you seen so far?
Well, I'm seeing some new body armor, new helmets also, and it would appear that some of their assault rifles, the Type 88, is what they use, which is an AK-74 variant. They have a very bulky new muzzle flash hider of some sort. So yeah. It's a bit blurry thus far, but I'd definitely say there have been a lot of changes in their personal equipment.
So what we're seeing right now is video of troops parading, playing music, things like that. Just for those of you who are new to the world of North Korean military parades, we normally see those at the start of the parade, followed by infantry coming through in blocks of units. And after that, we tend to see a slow build-up, a slow and steady build-up of smaller, wheeled vehicles leading up to tanks, leading up to artillery and rocket systems, short, medium, long-range ballistic missiles. So it looks like the video production has gone from a sort of highlights package at the start now to potentially the full show. So we could be in for a solid hour or 2 hours, maybe even 3 hours of coverage now, which will presumably culminate in potentially a form of new ballistic missile being shown. Jongmin, have you any thoughts about how this is going from a South Korean perspective? Like what's been the mood in Seoul today?
It was originally, people expected that it will happen this morning. And this is all coming after all the tension in inter-Korean relations after the South Korean government worker passed away in the North Korean waters. It was kind of split this week, people anticipating the military parade. On one hand, some people were worried that perhaps new news coming out of Pyongyang this weekend will overshadow what has been going on until now. But on the other hand, people were also already expecting new ICBMs, SLBMs, and TLs to be revealed in the military parade today. JCS and the Ministry of National Defense, they have been talking about it for a while now with the lawmakers during the audit this week and beforehand as well. So it was expected that it is going to go ahead today, but I don't think anybody expected that it's going to go ahead at night, which is very unprecedented.
That's right. The other thing is that we are, it's been very vague as to when this parade would start. We've had no information at all from the North Koreans, which is completely normal. I've reported on these parades a few times in Pyongyang, and even though everyone knows that we've been invited to the country as journalists to cover the parade, even until the very morning itself, be it 6-7 a.m., and we've gone through all the security, there is still no clue that we're going to a military parade. Our North Korean host will say we don't know what's going on, that it's just an important event. So it is, it's always kept very vague. Just if you're tuning in right now, this is the NK News, NK Pro live stream of North Korea's 75th anniversary of the Workers' Party of Korea. We are a specialist North Korea website focusing on North Korea. Been doing it for about 10 years now, and I'm very happy to be joined by some of my colleagues right now. Ankit Panda, who's calling in from New York City very, very early in the morning. We've got Joost Ollemans from the Netherlands, who is a author of a recent book on North Korea's military, and Jongmin Kim, who is a Seoul correspondent for NK News. So Ankit, you've been watching North Korea's WMD program for a while. Like, what would you say is the sort of biggest? How significant would you say it is? Is it a real threat to the United States right now, or is that threat still far away?
Well, threats you can make sense of as capabilities plus attention, and the capabilities that North Korea has demonstrated, particularly in 2017 when it conducted 3 flight tests of intercontinental range ballistic missiles, 2 Hwasong-14s and 1 Hwasong-15 in November 2017, North Korea showed that it could deliver a nuclear weapon to the U.S. homeland, and that was a significant milestone. So that capability, I think, was something manifestly and qualitatively new that year. So at this point, what the North Koreans can show us is qualitative refinements to that capability. So better ICBMs, larger ICBMs capable of carrying multiple warheads, multiple reentry vehicles, or they could demonstrate the refinement of their nuclear strike capability in theater in Northeast Asia. They have a wide range of systems that are designed specifically to hold U.S. military bases in East Asia, including in Korea and in Japan at risk. So we may learn more about those systems. Something I'm looking for in particular is evidence of quantitative growth, which, pre-parade satellite imagery suggests that the North Koreans are going to parade more transporter reactor launchers, or TELs, that's the launch vehicles for ballistic missiles. They're going to parade more than they ever have before. So that, I think, will be an interesting evolution of the threat from North Korea, since we'll make discussions about things like preemption, deterrence in the United States, South Korea and Japan are very different. It matters if North Korea has 4 to 6 ICBMs versus if they have, let's say, 10 plus, 15 plus today.
I am seeing from the YouTube comments, I'm seeing some questions whether or not this is live or if this was pre-recorded. To me, it seems it was pre-recorded and edited, and there were intelligence sources telling South Korean military earlier that it seems it went ahead last night.
Yeah, that's right. All our sources, like you can see the time there, midnight. That's the fireworks parade that we heard about from people in Pyongyang. So clearly, this was done last night. It's not live, but we're just seeing here comes Kim Jong-un in a Western-style suit. That's interesting because we haven't seen him in a Western-style suit in the parade most recently. But my colleague Jung-min is requesting I be quiet for a moment while we just listen into what the North Korean hosts are saying. So yeah, that's Kim Jong-un entering with his trademark music. You can hear all the crowd shouting applause for him. It's really quite incredible when you're there in person. People suddenly, like a bolt of lightning has gone into them, just wake up and start cheering very, very vividly when he comes in, and we can see that happening now. Another thing I should point out, so the parade stand, the observing area that Kim Jong-un is on right now, this is a new structure. The parade viewing stand for the last 10 plus military parades has been torn down earlier this year in a very elaborate, you can see marble there behind him. It looks like they've built a very elaborate new facility for him to talk. I'm going to shut up now while Kim introduces himself.
하늘땅을 침감하는 저 만세의 환호, 수령 숭배의 저 폭발, 누구나 가슴속에 꽉 차있는 생각. 얼마나 기다려왔습니까? 위대한 당신을 모시기 위해 얼마나 기다려온 영광의 순간입니까? 김정은 동지, 영광을 드립니다. 최대의 경의를 삼가 드립니다. 10월의 밤하늘가를 붉게 물들이며 터져오르는 저 척포, 천지를 침감하는 만세의 환호. 이 나라를 지켜주시고 인종만대의 번영의 길을 열어주신 인민의 보고이, 인민의 위대한 용도자를 우러러 이 나라 인민이 콧대려는
It seems that Kim Jong-un may give a speech, so we will listen in.
천재적인 예주와 비범한 용도로 우리 당을 태양의 조남으로 빛나는 주체의 혁명적 당, 인민의 삶과 행복과 미래를 지켜주는 오문이 당으로 강화 발전시키시고.
Another interesting observation, you can see no masks being worn by any of the attendees in this parade, nor the military. It suggests there's a lot of confidence in North Korea right now about the COVID situation. I'm going to be quiet again. It looks like Kim's about to speak. We will, when Kim delivers his speech, we're going to keep quiet, and then we'll give you a quick summary from Jungmin, who will be translating and just give you an insight into what he's saying.
조선노동당 중앙연회의 정치국 상무위원회 위원이며 당중앙 군사위원회 부위원장이며 당중앙연회 부위원장인 리병철 동지, 조선노동당 중앙연회 정치국 상무위원회 위원이며 조선민주주의인민공화국 내각 총리인 김덕훈 동지, 조선노동당 중앙연회 정치국 상무위원회 위원이며 조선민주주의인민공화국 공무위원회 부위원장이며 당중앙연회 부위원장인 박봉주 동지가 주속단에 자리 잡았습니다. 김재룡 동지, 리일한 동지, 최희 동지, 박태덕 동지, 김용철 동지를 비롯한 당중앙 지도기관 성원들이 주속단에 나왔습니다. 박정천 동지, 김수길 동지, 김종관 동지를 비롯한 군부의 지휘 성원들이 주속단에 나왔습니다. 당과 정부, 군부에서 오랜 기간 사업한 로 간부들이 초대석에 자리 잡았습니다. 초대석에는 조선노동당 장군 75돌 경축 대표들이 자리 잡고 있었습니다.
So yeah, as I was saying, this is Chad O'Carroll, by the way, from NK News. You can see no one is wearing any mask, and this really does seem to suggest that the country is very confident that it is indeed COVID-free. There's been a lot of question marks as to whether there could be coronavirus in North Korea, but as one precaution, almost 2 months before this parade started taking place, the North completely tightened its existing shutdown of the country. They implemented shoot to kill orders within a 1 to 2 kilometer range along the borders of China and South Korea. And as some of you will know, there was a recent evidence of this in the sense that a South Korean who was trying to allegedly defect to North Korea by swimming was shot several hours after he arrived in North Korea and killed. These are all thought to be part of North Korea's very intensive efforts to keep coronavirus out of the country before this parade. Mainly, we believe, so that the parade itself doesn't act as a kind of super spreader event. If there is one person at this parade or 2 people who are infected with coronavirus, it could be extremely damaging for the legitimacy and reputation of the Workers' Party of Korea. So every precaution has been taken thus far, but it's very interesting to see, paradoxically, that there are no masks being worn here.
When the officials were being introduced by KCTV just moments ago, you could see how some of the officials that recently rose to stardom, such as Ri Byung-chul. Speech is starting.
무력의 최고 영도자 김정은 동지께서 연설하시겠습니다.
경사스러운 10월 명절을 맞이한 온 나라 전체의 인민들과 인민군 장병들, 사회안전군 장병들과 노농조기군, 붉은 청년군의대 대원들, 당 창건 75돌 경축 대표들과 평양시민 여러분, 영광스러운 10월 명절 열병식에 참가한 열병부대 지휘관 전투원 동무들, 친애하는 동지들, 영광스러운 우리 당 창건절이 왔습니다. 위대한 영광의 밤을 맞이했습니다. 왜서인지 유례없이 간구했던 이해에 맞는 당 창건절은 이 영광의 밤이 드디어 왔다는 사실만으로도 너무도 감격스럽습니다. 위대한 우리 당 창건 75돌을 맞으며 나는 조선노동당 중앙위원회를 대표하여 오늘의 10월 명절을 크나큰 영광과 긍지로 빛내인 모든 분들에게 중심으로 되는 축하의 인사를 드립니다. 전체 우리 인민에게 뜨거운 감사와 축하의 인사를 삼가드립니다. 동지들, 위대한 명절의 이 밤 수도의 거리들과 여기 영광의 광장은 이렇듯 환희롭고 기쁨과 긍지로 설레이지만 오늘의 이 영광의 순간이 지금 전국 각지의 수많은 당원 동지들과 노동계급들, 우리 혁명군대 장병들이 보이지 않는 노력과 헌신에 의해 지켜지고 있다는 것을 우리 잊지 말아야 합니다. 오늘의 이 영광의 순간을 안아오고 지키기 위해 올해에 들어와 얼마나 많은 분들이 혹독한 환경을 인내하며 분투해 왔습니까? 우리가 얼마나 많은 도전들을 이겨내며 여기까지 왔습니까? 특히 올해 예상치 않게 맞닿은 방역전선과 자연재해 복구전선에서 우리 인민군 장병들이 발휘한 애국적이고 영웅적인 헌신은 누구든 감사의 눈물 없이는 대할 수 없는 것들입니다. 조국보위, 인민보위, 혁명보위가 인민군대의 마땅한 본연의 임무라고는 하겠지만 우리 장병들의 고생이 너무도 컸습니다. 너무도 많은 것을 맡아 안고 고생도 많은 우리 장병들입니다. 그래서 너무도 미안하고 이 영광의 밤에 그들 모두와 함께 있지 못한 것이 마음이 아픕니다. 바로 지금 이 시각에도 수많은 우리 부대 장병들이 영광의 이 김일성 광장에 오지 못하고 국가의 안전과 인민의 안녕을 지켜 방역 전초선과 재복구 전선에서 용감히 싸우고 있습니다. 우리 군대는 이처럼 적대 세력들의 군사적 위협뿐만 아니라 방역과 자연과의 투쟁과 같은 돌발적인 위협에도 국가 방위의 주체로서 자기 임무를 훌륭히 수행하고 있습니다. 우리 국가와 인민에 대한 그들의 열렬한 중요심에 최대의 경의를 드리며 전군의 모든 장병들에게 뜨거운 감사를 보냅니다. 또한 자기들이 피해복구 건설 임무를 완수하고도 사랑하는 집이 있는 평양행을 택하지 않고 스스로들 또 다른 피해복구 지역으로 발걸음들을 옮긴 애국자들, 마땅히 이 자리에 있어야 할 우리의 핵심들, 나의 가장 믿음직한 수도당원 사단 전투원들에게도 전투적 공허와 감사의 인사를 보냅니다. 그리고 전국의 모든 근로자들에게 전투적 인사와 감사를 보냅니다. 자연의 재난을 털고 새마을 새집들의 보금자리를 편 세대들과 온 나라 가정들의 행복과 기쁨만이 깃들기를 축원합니다. 우리 어린이들에게 언제나 푸른 꿈이 펼쳐지기를 바랍니다. 이 자리를 빌어 지금 이 시각도 악성 비루스에 의한 병화와 싸우고 있는 전 세계의 모든 이들에게 따뜻한 위로의 마음을 보내며 진심으로 마음속 깊이 모든 사람들의 건강이 제발 지켜지고 행복과 웃음이 지켜지기를 간절히 바랍니다. 사랑하는 남녘의 동포들에게도 따뜻한 이 마음을 정히 보내며 하루빨리 이 보건 위기가 극복되고 북과 남이 다시 두 손을 마주 잡는 날이 찾아오기를 기원합니다. 동지들, 오늘 우리 모두는 일심전력하여 마련한 값진 성과와 노력적 열매들을 안고 10월의 경축광장에 모였습니다. 우리가 여기에 오기까지는 정말 쉽지 않았습니다. 간고한 투쟁의 연속이었고 수없이 많은 경난들을 이겨내야 했습니다. 지나온 우리 당의 75성상이 다 그러하였지만 특별히 올해는 정초부터 하루하루 한 걸음 한 걸음이 예상치 않았던 엄청난 도전과 장애로 하여 참으로 간구하고 힘겨웠습니다. 우리는 그 모든 것을 용감히 이겨내고 자랑스럽고 떳떳한 마음으로 뜻깊은 이 자리에 섰습니다. 세인이 경탄할 이 화폭 자체가 우리를 괴롭히고 막아나섰던 온갖 재앙들이 제압되고 우리가 내세웠던 정의로운 투쟁 목표들이 빛나게 달성되었음을 보여주고 있습니다. 친애하는 동지들, 오늘 우리는 우리 당의 75번째 생일을 성대히 맞이하고 있습니다. 세상에는 우리처럼 자기 당의 생일을 전체 인민이 기쁨의 명절로 대경사의 날로 성대히 경축하는 나라는 없습니다. 온 나라의 마음이 뜨겁게 굽이치는 이처럼 벅차고 환희로운 밤, 이 자리에 서고 보니 전체 인민에게 무슨 말씀부터 들었으면 좋을지 모르겠습니다. 우리 당이 걸어온 영광 넘친 75년사를 갈피갈피 돌이켜보는 이 시각, 오늘 이 자리에 서면 무슨 말부터 할까 많이 생각도 해보았지만 진정 우리 인민들에게 터놓고 싶은 마음속 고백, 마음속 진정은 고맙습니다, 이 한마디뿐입니다.
We're going to be providing some food to Kim Jong-un has seen difficult times, realizing that the soldiers of North Korea have been working very, very hard on various projects. We're going to go back to him right now.
정말 고맙습니다. 이 말씀은 꼭 드리고 싶었습니다. 한 명의 악성 비루스 피해자도 없이 모두가 건강해 주셔서 정말 고맙습니다. 세상을 무섭게 휩쓸고 있는 몹쓸 전염병으로부터 이 나라의 모든 이들을 끝끝내 지켜냈다는 이 사실, 우리 당이 응당마땅히 해야 할 일이었고 응당한 성과라 해야겠지만도 왜서인지 지켜냈다는 이 감격의 기쁨에 눈앞이 흐려지고 모두가 건강하신 모습을 배우니 고맙습니다 이 말밖에 할 말을 더 찾을 수가 없습니다. 세상이 놀라지 않을 수 없는 오늘의 이 승리는 우리 인민들 스스로가 이루어낸 위대한 승리입니다. 우리 당에 있어서 인민들 한 사람 한 사람의 생명은 그 무엇보다 소중하며 전체 인민이 건재하고 건강해야 당도 있고 국가도 있고 이 땅의 모든 것이 다 있습니다. 그런데 이 세계에는 귀중한 우리 인민의 삶을 위협하고 해치려는 불안정한 요소가 너무나도 많습니다. 그래서 사실 연초부터 세계적인 보건위기가 도래하고 주변 상황도 좋지 않아 고민도 컸고 두려움도 컸습니다. 허나 우리 인민은 억척같이 뻗치고 일어나 당과 국가가 취하는 조치들을 절대적으로 지지하고 따라주며 자신들의 운명을 완강히 지켜냈을 뿐 아니라 활기 넘친 모습으로 모진 고난과 시련을 강하게 이겨냈습니다. 서로서로 걱정해주고 위해주고 감싸 안아주는 아름다운 인민, 이런 인민이 높은 애국심과 고도의 자각성을 가지고 서로 협력하며 살아가는 사회주의가 아니었다면 무서운 재앙을 막아내지 못하였을 것입니다. 우리 인민 모두가 스스로 방역의 주체가 되어 국가와 자기들 스스로를 지키고 우리 아이들을 지키기 위한 투쟁에 한 사람같이 떨쳐나섰기에 모든 것이 부족하고 뒤떨어진 나라의 방역 부분이 일도속에 되었고 남들 같으면 상상할 수도 없는 방역 안정 형세를 유지할 수 있었습니다. 아직 풍족하게 살지는 못해도 화목한 대가정을 이루고 단 한 명의 악성 비루스 피해자도 없이 모두가 건강하니 이것이 얼마나 고맙고 얼마나 큰 힘이 되는지 모르겠습니다. 국가가 당하는 어려운 상황을 깊이 이해해주고 자기 집일처럼 떠맡는 고마운 인민도 이 세상에 우리 인민밖에는 없습니다. 지금 이 행성의 가혹하고 장기적인 제재 때문에 모든 것이 부족한 속에서도 비상방역도 해야 하고 혹심한 자연 피해도 복구해야 하는 엄청난 도전과 난관에 직면한 나라는 우리나라뿐입니다. 이 모든 시련은 두말할 것 없이 우리 매 가정, 매 국민들에게 무거운 짐으로, 아픔으로 되고 있습니다. 하지만 오히려 가사보다 국사를 앞에 놓고 국가가 겪는 고난을 10가지든 100가지든 함께 걸머지며 성실한 땀과 노력으로 이 나라를 굳건히 받드는 고마운 애국자들이 바로 우리 인민입니다. 그래서 우리 당은 나라의 형편을 터놓으면 언제나 산악같이 일떠서는 인민을 믿고 인민에게 의거하여 모든 국난을 타개해 나가고 있는 것입니다. 늘 우리 인민들은 우리 당에 고마워했지만 정녕 고마움의 인사를 받으셔야 할 주인들은 바로 위대한 우리 인민입니다. 우리 인민은 75성상 일편단심 우리 당을 받들고 성스러운 혁명 위협을 자기의 피와 땀을 아낌없이 서슴없이 바쳐 지켜주었습니다. 가장 간고하고도 시련에 찬 혁명의 길을 헤쳐온 우리 당이 이 피어린 여정을 승리와 영광으로 수놓을 수 있은 근본 비결은 다름 아닌 우리 인민이 당을 진심으로 믿어주고 따르며 우리 당의 위협을 지켜주었기 때문입니다. 언제나 현명한 스승이 되어 지혜와 슬기를 주었고 무한한 힘과 용기를 안겨주었으며 결사적으로 옹의하고 성심으로 받들어주며 당의 구상과 노선을 빛나는 현실로 만들어준 역사의 전능한 창조자인 위대한 우리 인민을 떠나서 어찌 우리 당의 영광 넘친 75년사에 대하여 한순간인들 생각할 수 있겠습니까? 당에서 대고조를 호소하면 천리마를 타고 호응했고 대건설을 작전하면 속도전으로 화답했으며 당의 결심을 몰부를 가림없이 무조건 실천해내고야만 하는 위대한 인민이 항상 곁에 있었기에 우리 당은 언제나 든든하였고 어떤 국경 속에서도 이 땅에 기적의 년년을 새겨올 수 있었습니다. 나는 진함없는 충효심과 굴할 줄 모르는 투지, 성실한 노력으로서 세상 풍파를 다 뚫고 넘으며 위대한 10월 명절을 승리의 단상에 떠올린 우리 인민의 모습에서 앞으로 75년이 아니라 750년, 7500년이라도 당을 따르고 지켜줄 하늘 같은 힘을 온몸으로 뿌듯이 받아안게 됩니다. 동지들, 하늘 같고 바다 같은 우리 인민의 너무도 크나큰 믿음을 받아안기만 하면서 언제나 제대로 한번 보답이 따르지 못해 정말 면목이 없습니다. 제가 전체 인민이 신임 속에 위대한 수령님과 위대한 장군님의 위협을 받들어 이 나라를 이끄는 중책을 지니고 있지만 아직 노력과 정성이 부족하여 우리 인민들이 생활상 어려움에서 벗어나지 못하고 있습니다. 그럼에도 우리 인민들은 언제나 나를 믿고 나를 절대적으로 신뢰하고 나의 선택과 결심을 그 무엇이든 지지하고 받들어주고 있습니다. 설사 그것이 더 큰 고생을 각오해야 하는 것이라 할지라도 나와 우리 당에 대한 인민의 믿음은 언제나 무조건적이고 확고부동한 것으로 되고 있습니다. 이렇듯 강렬하고 진정 어린 믿음과 고무 경륜은 나에게 있어서 그 어떤 명예와도 바꿀 수 없고 수억만 금에도 비길 수 없는 가장 소중한 제부이며 두려움과 불가능을 모르게 하는 무한대한 힘입니다. 이 세상 그 누구도 바랄 수 없는 최대의 신임이 있기에 나는 멸사복무의 사명감과 의지를 가다듬으며 무수한 도전들을 주저없이 맞받아 나갈 수 있었고 전쟁까지 각오해야 하는 결사전에도 나설 수 있었으며 사상 초유의 대재앙에도 강력히 대처할 수 있었습니다. 이런 훌륭한 우리 인민을 섬기고 모시고 투쟁하는 것을 무상의 영광으로 간직하겠습니다. 나는 우리 인민의 하늘 같은 믿음을 지키는 길에 설사 몸이 찢기고 부서진다 해도 그 믿음만은 목숨까지 바쳐서라도 무조건 지킬 것이고 그 믿음에 끝까지 충실할 것을 다시 한번 이 자리에서 엄숙히 확언합니다. 존경하는 온 나라 전체 인민들 여러분, 정말 고맙습니다. 우리 수령님과 장군님의 마음까지 합쳐 온 나라 전체 인민들에게 경건한 마음으로 고마움에 차 넘치는 진정 정중히 삼가 올립니다. 동지들, 우리 인민을 억척으로 지키고 더 높이 떠받들며 부름없이 잘 살게 하는 것은 나와 우리 당의 제일 사명이고 확고부동한 의지입니다. 우리 당은 이미 우리 인민이 존엄이고 생명인 사회주의를 굳건히 수호하고 우리 인민이 영원히 전쟁을 모르는 땅에서 자자손손 번영할 수 있게 평화수호를 위한 최강의 군력을 비추게 놓았습니다. 위풍당당히 정렬한 오늘의 이 열병 대오는 조선노동당이 자기의 혁명군대를 어떻게 키웠는지 또한 그 군대의 위력이 얼만큼 강한지 똑바로 알 수 있게 할 것입니다. 불과 5년 전 바로 이 장소에서 진행된 당 창건 이른돌 경축 열병식과 대비해보면 누구나 잘 알 수 있겠지만 우리 군사력의 현대성은 많이 더 변했으며 그 발전의 속도를 누구나 쉽게 가늠해 볼 수 있을 것입니다. 우리는 자기 당의 혁명 사상으로 튼튼히 무장하고 자기 혁명利益에 전적으로 복무하는 충실하고 강력한 국방과학기술대군과 군수노동계급을 가지고 있습니다. 우리의 군사력은 그 누구도 넘보거나 견주지 못할 만큼 발전하고 변했습니다. 우리가 직면하고 있거나 맞다둘 수 있는 그 어떤 군사적 위협도 충분히 통제 관리할 수 있는 억제력을 갖추었습니다. 우리의 군사력은 우리식, 우리의 요구대로, 우리의 시간표대로 그 발전 속도와 질과 량이 변해가고 있습니다. 우리 당은 우리 국가와 인민의 자주권과 생존권을 건드리거나 위협을 줄 수 있는 세력은 선제적으로 제압할 수 있는 군사적 능력을 제일 확실하고 튼튼한 국가 방위력으로 규정했으며 그를 실천할 수 있는 군사력 보유에 모든 것을 다해왔고 지금 이 순간에도 부단한 갱신 목표들을 점령해 가고 있습니다. 우리는 적대 세력들에 의해 지속적으로 가중되는 핵 위협을 포괄하는 모든 위험한 시도들과 위협적 행동들을 억제하고 통제 관리하기 위하여 자의적 정당 방위 수단으로서의 전쟁 억제력을 계속 강화해 나갈 것입니다. 국가의 자주권과 생존권을 지키고 지역의 평화를 수호하는 데 이바지할 우리의 전쟁 억제력이 결코 남용되거나 절대로 선제적으로 쓰이지는 않겠지만 만약 그 어떤 세력이든 우리 국가의 안전을 다쳐놓는다면 우리를 겨냥해 군사력을 사용하려 든다면 나는 우리의 가장 강력한 공격적인 힘을 선제적으로 총동원하여 응징할 것입니다. 나는 우리의 군사력이 그 누구를 겨냥하게 되는 것을 절대로 원치 않습니다. 우리는 그 누구를 겨냥해서 우리의 전쟁 억제력을 키우는 것이 아님을 분명히 합니다. 우리 스스로를 지키자고 키우는 것뿐입니다. 만약 힘이 없다면 두 주먹을 부러지고도 흐르는 눈물과 피만 닦아야 할 것입니다. 우리 당은 강력한 군사력으로 나라의 주권과 우리 영토의 믿음직한 안전을 보장하며 국가와 인민의 영원한 안녕과 평화와 미래를 수호해 나갈 것입니다. 동지들, 조선노동당의 혁명사상으로 무장하고 조국과 인민에게 무한히 중요하며 우리 인민의 힘과 넋이 있던 강력한 최신 무기들로 장비한 혁명 무력이 있기에 그 어떤 침략 세력도 절대로 신성한 우리 국가를 넘볼 수 없으며 조선인민의 앞길을 감히 막지 못합니다. 이제 남은 것은 우리 인민이 더는 고생을 모르고 유족하고 문명한 생활을 마음껏 누리게 하는 것입니다. 우리 당은 인민들의 복리를 증진시키고 더 많은 혜택을 안겨줄 우월한 정책과 시책들을 변함없이 실시하고 끊임없이 늘려나갈 것이며 인민들이 꿈속에서도 그려보는 부흥번영의 리상사회를 최대로 앞당겨 올 것입니다. 지금까지 우리 당은 혹독한 고난 속에서 인민들과 생사운명을 같이 하면서 그리고 우리 인민의 단결된 힘을 체득하는 과정을 통하여 앞으로 우리가 무엇을 해야 하는가에 대하여 잘 알게 되었습니다. 조선노동당 제8차 대회는 그 실현을 위한 방략과 구체적인 목표를 제시하게 될 것이며 인민의 행복을 마련해 나가는 우리 당의 투쟁은 이제 새로운 단계로 이행하게 될 것입니다. 우리가 일떠설수록 온갖 반동 세력들이 더 기승을 부리고 예상치 않았던 난관들도 닥쳐들 수 있지만 이때까지 우리가 겪은 시련에 비하면 아무것도 아니며 우리에게는 그 모든 것을 격파할 힘이 있고 자신심이 있습니다. 장구한 투쟁 노정에서 다져진 당과 인민 대중의 일심 단결이 있고 우리 사회주의가 키워내고 마련한 인재 역량과 자립에 미쳐는 분명 우리의 전진을 주동하고 가속하는 강력한 힘으로 작용할 것입니다. 남들이 겪어보지 못한 무수한 고난과 시련의 고비들을 넘어오면서 남들이 엄두도 낼 수 없는 모든 것을 다 해낸 우리 당과 인민은 더 큰 용기와 신심, 비상한 열정과 각오를 가지고 새로운 발전과 번영회로의 진군을 시작할 것입니다.
DPRK at the moment. As you probably saw earlier, quite emotional. We're just going to go back to him now.
우리 인민을 위하여, 인민들에게 더 좋은 내일을 안겨주기 위하여 무진 애를 쓰며 정성을 다해 일해 나가도록 더더욱 엄격한 요구성을 제기하고 투쟁하도록 하겠습니다. 우리 인민의 리상은 위대하며 그 리상이 실현될 날은 꼭 옵니다. 위대한 그 리상을 실현함에 총력을 다해 나감으로써 사회주의 건설의 더 높은 목표를 점령해 나가는 길에서 누구나 체감할 수 있는 혁신과 발전, 실질적인 변화를 이룩하도록 하겠습니다. 동지들, 우리는 강해졌으며 시련 속에서 더욱 강해지고 있습니다. 시간은 우리 편에 있습니다. 모두 다 사회주의 휴양한 미래를 향하여 새로운 승리를 쟁취하기 위하여 힘차게 싸워 나갑시다.
So Kim Jong-un is talking about the grave economic problems afflicting the DPRK right now, or North Korea. COVID-19 problems, the country is totally isolated. He's back. We will continue. One moment.
그리고 변함없이 우리 당을 믿어주시는 마음들의 충심으로 감사를 드립니다. 위대한 우리 인민 만세!
Saying North Koreans should live forever. Manse. And you can see the fireworks going off in Pyongyang. Just a reminder, this is taped late last night, probably around almost 1 a.m. I'd say by this stage, given the tapes been rolling almost an hour since the broadcast started. Now, Kim Jong-un's speech is over. I'm going to pass the mic over to Jongmin Kim, who is our sole correspondent here at NK News. She's been carefully transcribing everything so far and can give us a brief summary of what's being said.
I had a rough transcription just now. The main theme of today's Kim Jong-un speech was how much hardship North Korea has been going through this year, including COVID-19 prevention efforts, flood damages, and multiple typhoons. And they also mentioned sanctions, that amid all this, because of sanctions, their economy suffered and their people suffered. But that Kim Jong-un and the Workers' Party of Korea will work hard to bring the quote-unquote ideal society for the North Korean people. That's Ri Chun-hee. So yes, the main theme was how much hardship they have been going through, and Kim Jong-un led his speech starting with how sorry he feels for the soldiers of the country. If you have been following North Korean news for the past few weeks and months, because North Korea suffered from typhoons and floodings, Kim Jong-un ordered the soldiers to actually go to those places to reconstruct the towns, which they claim that they actually did in some places. So he was thanking them, and he was shedding tears for how much hard work their soldiers have been, how much effort their soldiers have been pouring on these projects, and how it aches him that they couldn't be here because they were still at the recovery projects. Another emotional moment for Kim Jong-un's speech that evening was that he said that he's so grateful for the North Korean people for staying alive and not contracting COVID-19. He claimed that no North Korean person has contracted COVID-19, and he was very much relieved that the country was not the country did not suffer actual confirmed COVID-19 cases. Also, if you have been following news, you could see that WHO has been actually just echoing North Korean government's argument that there has been no confirmed cases despite thousands of testings going on in North Korea. Another important part was that Kim Jong-un actually mentioned South Korea. It only has been weeks since Kim Jong-un personally apologized for the death of the South Korean worker in North Korean waters. Although he did not mention that incident, he said something very similar to the letter he sent to President Moon in early September. In the speech for the October 10th anniversary, this time he mentioned that he hopes everybody around the world stays healthy and overcomes COVID-19, including South Korea, and how he extends his warm greetings to the compatriots in South Korea. And he hopes for a day that South Korea and North Korea could hold hands again. After they overcome all that. That kind of warm message towards South Korea, it has been a while. We saw something like that since Moon Jae-in and Kim Jong-un met before on the Paektu mountain.
So right now we're seeing the flags being raised to the sound of music. This is what happens at the very start of North Korean military parades every single year. So it's a sign that the actual military parade aspect is about to begin imminently. As Kim Jong-un looks down, it looks like with Hyun Sung-wol, the picture's a little blurry, but yeah, he's ready to observe the parade. You can see some pilots here. This is very unusual to see these edited scenes of pilots getting ready to get into use. Are these MiG-29s? Can you fill us in?
Yes, these are MiG-29s, the North Korean MiG-29s, and I also saw some Sukhoi 25s. Those are basically the two most advanced aircraft which North Korea possesses. And they then shot past some Romeo-class submarines, which are Soviet-era submarines, which are still some of the largest submarines the North Koreans use.
So yeah, it looks like they're showing the tape of the pilots getting ready, because about 15-20 minutes into these parades we normally see flybys, low flying aircraft. You'll get the MiGs and the Sukhois doing a low fly formation, and then normally you'll see some propeller planes blowing smoke in colors, or depicting the numbers of the year of the anniversary, which is 75 this time. So it looks like, I mean, the production here is really significantly evolved compared to the last two military parades I've seen. Not just the way the square has been renovated and is being lit in a much brighter fashion than we've ever seen, but also the cinematography. It almost seems like this has been done with a kind of Hollywood style in mind. Anke, have you any thoughts on how this is going to be going down in DC with viewers perhaps like Trump who might be tuning in?
That's true. It is. It is around the American president's time to wake up early in the day. I suspect the news will filter in as the day goes on. Given that this is taking place early, a lot of Washington will be waking up on a Saturday to learn about whatever North Korea is about to show off. But I suspect it will have the effect of raising North Korea on the diplomatic agenda here. It has started to drift down, particularly as the U.S. enters the final stretch of the election. But if Kim Jong Un was hoping to have that effect, I suspect this intriguingly produced parade will have that effect.
So one thing we've been wondering about today as the day went on and video was still absent, we were wondering, is it possible the North Koreans may not actually release this video? Would it be more in Kim Jong-un's interest to be ambiguous about military capabilities so close to a US election? What kind of strategic tactical gains in DPRK US relations do you think the North Koreans will get, Ankit, by revealing significant military capabilities, potentially new strategic weapons, so close to an election where presumably they want to try and keep warm relations with Donald Trump, but we don't know. So yeah, I'm just curious, what's the value that North Korea gets from this with the US DPRK relationship?
I mean, I think the logic for diplomacy is similar to the purpose of conducting missile tests in 2017. It's a reminder that North Korea continues to expand and refine its nuclear forces, and if the U.S. is interested in stopping that progress or stopping that growth, then they will come to the table and do a deal with North Korea that will cap that, and whatever North Korea wants in exchange for that, it should get effectively. So what we're seeing with this parade, I mean, if there is an external purpose, I mean, I happen to think a lot of what we're seeing today does have a very strong internal messaging component, as we just saw from Kim Jong-un. But for the purposes of the outside world and for the United States, it is a reminder that the longer the U.S. waits, that North Korea will continue to grow. That time is not on the side of the United States.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think you've got a comment here.
Yeah, I just thought it was interesting to note that these vehicles you're seeing the North Korean general standing in, these are being shown for the first time. As in, during the last parade, they showed us some of these infantry mobility vehicles, heavily armored jeeps, and they were new then too. These are of a new type. So they're showing us that they are ramping up production of such armored vehicles, which are also seeing in a lot of Western countries, of course, or modern militaries across the world.
And we're also seeing white horses. Jongmin, any comments on that?
Horses, which showed up in the trade data, and maybe that points to how they were actually using that for the military parade. We are not sure as of now if they used those horses before. Anybody who can comment on that?
Yeah, I've not seen the white horses, I believe, in the military parades before, so that does look like it could be a new development. Now, you'll have heard us talking earlier on about Kim Jong-un being emotional about the state of the economy, what's going on in North Korea broadly. Just for those of you who are unfamiliar, this has been a really tough year for North Korea. We've seen the country under chronic sanctions since 2017, which former US ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, in 2017 said would basically prevent North Korea exporting almost 90% of the value of its entire normal exports. On top of that, we have the COVID outbreak, which is stopping all transport, cargo, to a large extent, in and out of the country. That's having a huge impact on North Korea's economy. We know that's effectively stopped the Chinese tourism industry, which just a couple of years ago, in fact, last year we estimated around between 300 to 600,000 Chinese tourists a year. And on top of that, two other sets of problems. We've had really grave weather this year in Korea, particularly in August. And we've seen 3 back-to-back typhoons, 2 of which really hit the north pretty badly. We saw flooding. And if that wasn't enough, we've seen Kim Jong-un several times this year complain and berate his own officials for economic mismanagement, corruption, things like that. So you add this all together, and there's no end in sight right now for COVID or the sanctions, and you can start to understand why Kim Jong-un may be upset to a degree about the performance of his leadership, because just 4 or 5 years ago at the 2016 7th Congress, Kim Jong-un was talking up a new 5-year economic plan. We were expecting to see that pay dividends for the North Korean economy. It's not worked out very well. A lot of large state economic projects have stalled or are frozen in incomplete states. And the really interesting thing, I guess, will be to see how, if those problems translate into military problems. Ankit, we haven't seen missile tests for a long time. Do you think that could be potentially due to these economic problems translating into obstacles for the military?
Not necessarily. They simply might not be in a position where the developmental advantages are worthwhile with testing right now. We should note that we have seen a resumed testing campaign beginning in 2019 and carrying into early this year. But notably, that has involved the testing of systems that North Korea has presented to the outside world as non-nuclear, with the exception of one test of a submarine-launched ballistic missile. When North Korea does test, it anticipates, particularly of the strategic long-range systems, it anticipates external costs, potentially in the form of sanctions. The Trump administration, I think, showed that after the SLBM tests last October, that wasn't really a risk anymore for North Korea. So it is possible that they may return to testing. But just in terms of the calendar, what we notice in the Kim Jong-un era is that testing tends to wrap up, with a few exceptions, by October. So the months of November, December, and ultimately January tend to be a little bit slower for missile testing.
Okay, and tell us what you're seeing. There's lots of new military capabilities here. What's standing out to you so far?
Yeah, really. From the lineup that they were just showing us, I can see a variety of types that have never before been shown. So absolutely tons of the roughly 600 millimeter oversized rocket systems, which they've shown tested a year or two back. But also new air defense systems, what seemed like new main battle tanks, really all across the range, new and very modern looking equipment.
Am I right in thinking the camouflage on some of these has changed as well? Or is it the light?
That might be the lighting. As far as I can tell, this army drab green is pretty common.
And my colleague Collins Verco, who you can follow on Twitter, he says he spotted some Pukguksong 3 solid fuel missiles. Has anyone else seen those?
Had not spotted them yet, but perhaps.
I spotted a range of Pukguksong 2 medium-range ballistic missiles. Those are the ones that have been in mass production since the diplomacy began with North Korea. So I'm actually quite curious to see how many we'll see. It looked like to me they might have as many as at least 8 in a lineup. That wouldn't be shocking, but I'm curious to see if there's more.
And these are important because which city do they have in range that most people don't think about, Ankit?
Yeah, so the Pukguksong 2 is basically a system that allows North Korea to hold all U.S. facilities in South Korea and Japan's main 4 islands, so not Okinawa, at risk. And so, the North Koreans have conducted military exercises with the Pukguksong 2 and missiles of similar range, showing that, they have the capabilities to strike specific facilities, including Iwakuni, a base in Japan where the U.S. Marine Corps is based. So it is a significant capability. It is a solid propellant missile, so it's much more responsive compared to North Korea's older liquid propellant Scud missiles. So it is a capability that they feel is an important contributor to their nuclear deterrent.
And if memory serves, the first time this was tested was in February 2017. And at the time, I seem to remember it was a day where there was some kind of large-scale Chinese political gathering. Relations between the two countries weren't going very well. And some analysts pointed out that the roughly 1,000-kilometer range could also hit Beijing, and that might be part of the message.
I remember that. Yeah, I think the North Koreans actually broadcast some footage from space when the missile was on its lofted flight trajectory. That was one of the first times they showed an image of the Earth taken from the reentry vehicle of the Pukguksong 3 of the Pukguksong 2, and you could see part of China. I'm not sure that was part of the messaging, but yes, I believe it was around the time of the first Belt and Road Forum in Beijing. So it was inopportune timing for China.
Yeah, I seem to remember some other tests that year which took place on the dates of Chinese political gatherings. I think one was something relating to leaders in Africa. I was in Beijing at the time, and I remember Tiananmen Square was closed off in anticipation of this gathering, and we got to the airport the day after the test, and I remember reading on the plane back to Seoul, I think it was People's Daily, and there was zero coverage whatsoever of this North Korean missile test that had clashed on the exact same day as this political gathering in Beijing. So yeah, those were the days when relations between China and North Korea not so good. We have been hearing, though, very unverified reports in the Daily NK, which is another publication focusing on North Korea here in Seoul, that while no foreign diplomats are being allowed to attend this event, that there has been a very special exception made for Chinese diplomats who have apparently been allowed to enter the country without going through the traditional quarantine processes, who have only been tested on their, with a thermometer, etc. As I said, it's completely unverified. All of our sources have not been able to confirm this, but if true, it would be reflective of a really warming relationship that we've seen between China and North Korea since the outbreak of diplomacy in January 2018. You'll remember in 2017 there was a lot of tension around the peninsula, and when January kicked off in 2018, the first place Kim Jong-un went to visit was China, to visit Xi Jinping. I think he was there for his actual birthday around January 8th, 2018. And that all culminated in President Xi Jinping visiting Pyongyang in June last year, which was a really very significant visit with lots of pomp and splendor. And the relationship has sort of been evolving ever since. Jongmin, you've told us a little bit about the South-North relationship. How would you describe it at the moment?
In general, well, we should remember that there was a very important escalation of tensions in June when they blew up the Inter-Korean Liaison Office. After that, although Kim Jong-un suspended military actions against South Korea, which was, by the way, it seemed like Kim Yo-jong's project, it was pretty quiet for a few months. But then just last month, a few weeks ago, because of the shooting and killing incident in the North Korean waters, it almost escalated again. But right afterwards, because the United Front Department, which is in charge of South Korea affairs in North Korea, they explained their version of the story. Although it was a little bit different, it involved some apologies in South Korea just day after they issued very strongly worded statement. They reverted back to saying that they take Kim Jong-un's apology sincerely. After that, it was just some domestic nitty-gritty fights inside South Korea, whether or not the South Korean military acted fast enough when the South Korean government worker somehow floated into the North Korean waters, and it's still contested if he was indeed defecting to North Korea or not, as the North Korean side did not explain that part of the story. While I have the mic, let me explain just a little bit what Kim Jong-un in his speech mentioned about military power. We are seeing all these soldiers marching and weaponries in the military parade right now. And Kim Jong-un's logic for arranging all this is that he wants to show the people and the world that for the past 5 years, since the 70th anniversary military parade, how much they have developed and how much modernized their weaponry has become. And he directly said that if you quote unquote, if you compare it to the 70th anniversary military parade, you will clearly see. So this is definitely something meant for the outside world to see as well. Another interesting thing that he mentioned about military power is that North Korea currently has the deterrent to control and manage any and all military threats that North Korea is facing. Kim Jong-un did not mention any specific countries like United States or South Korea or Japan or whatever. But this was very similar to what Kim Jong-un has been saying in the December plenum. Kim Jong-un said that whoever tries to attack us preemptively, we will do the same thing using our. If they notice it, they will use their strong military power to punish them. Although Kim Jong-un made a disclaimer that their improvement of military power is for defense purposes, and the war deterrent is for the self-protection, and that they will try as hard as they can not to use them preemptively. He mentioned nuclear threats as well, although also not referring to any specific countries. And he also mentioned that it seemed like he's trying to stay low-key a little bit about this. He said that the military power that North Korea is trying to develop, it's not for the sake of targeting anybody else, but it's just for the sake of deterrent. So all in all, to me, it seems that Kim Jong-un tried not to stay away from being overly provocative, it seems.
Anki, a few thoughts on that nuclear doctrine?
Yeah, so we've been trying to piece together North Korea's precise nuclear doctrine from a range of sources. There's a 2013 law that codifies a bunch of things about the conditions under which North Korea might use nuclear weapons. We have information on targeting from not only various missile tests, but other propaganda events, most famously in 2013, when North Korea released, quote, the map of death that showed a number of targets in the United States. But it's interesting to hear Kim Jong-un, rule out things like a preemptive strike. There has been some confusion in the past about North Korea potentially declaring, no first use, that it wouldn't use nuclear weapons first. I think that that's a little overstated. The North Koreans tend to emphasize a negative security assurance, so they claim that they will never use nuclear weapons against a state that doesn't have nuclear weapons and a state that isn't allied with a state that has nuclear weapons. So that's bad news for South Korea and Japan, who do benefit from American extended deterrence. But it's an interesting choice of language that I think, as Jungmin correctly says, messages, that's a useful message internally, codifying that the treasured sword, the nuclear deterrent, remains capable and remains well-honed, but it doesn't explicitly threaten the United States. That said, my interpretation of North Korea's doctrine, at least from what I've been able to piece together from a variety of sources, is that they do intend to, they reserve the right to use nuclear weapons first, and really the deterrent value of their nuclear weapons, as far as they perceive it, is very much wound up in that credible ability to deploy nuclear weapons first against whoever their adversaries might be, primarily to stall and degrade the ability by the United States and allies to conduct what North Korea fears will be an invasion of its territory.
Thanks. Now, Joost, you're a specialist of North Korean conventional military technologies, infantry, etc. Talk us through what you're seeing.
Yeah, that's right. What we're seeing is a very broad modernization of the personal equipment of KPA soldiers. Their personal equipment had, until just a few decades ago, basically been stuck in Cold War era, very basic Cold War era equipment. And since the early 2000s, 2010s, they've begun introducing new uniforms, new camouflage, but we're also seeing a widespread introduction of body armor all of a sudden. we're seeing a whole bunch of new modifications of their AK-74 derived assault rifles. So for the first time in this parade, we're seeing new optics, mainly fairly large-looking scopes. But we're also seeing new muzzle brakes, which serve to hide the flash. I've seen in their special forces suppressors and flashlights, all very new. I've seen new button stocks under their weaponry. I've even, I think I saw, but this is difficult to discern due to the quality. I think I even saw what looked like an entirely new type of assault rifle here, which is really quite surprising, since the obvious choice would be to continue upgrading and making your existing type of assault rifle more efficient, because it is battle proven, and well, that would be the cheapest option. But it seems they're really just going ahead with innovation, and you're seeing that in a couple of pieces of equipment which we have yet to see, which will undoubtedly feature later, such as their new multi-weapon, which looks a lot like the South Korean K-11 multi-weapon. It combines a grenade launcher and a standard assault rifle into one, and combines it with a modern fire control computer. So that's really a very modern-looking equipment. They also introduced a few types of extremely high-capacity magazines in recent years, including a helical magazine. That's the bulky-looking device you're seeing underneath the personal weapons of these soldiers right here. These are magazines that can hold upwards of 150 rounds, and this really increase the firepower available to the average soldier. And yeah, just seeing so many of these upgrades, a lot of them new to this parade.
And just a technical question. On a parade like this, this is to both of you. I'll start with you, Joost. These guns they're holding, would they be real? If not, could these just be elaborate replicas to make us think that these are really evolving conventional military capabilities?
They're definitely real, as in whenever you're seeing like an RPG or whatever, the warheads on those are going to be test examples, of course. You don't want anyone firing during a parade. But if you're wondering about whether they're mock-ups, as far as I can tell, North Korea doesn't really do the entire let's try to convince the outside world we have more advanced stuff than we really do, at least not on this level. So if you're gonna see a new type of weapon during their parades, you can bet that they're at least well, intending to introduce that weapon on a very short time scale. And that makes sense, because each of these units which you see walking here is like 2,500 people. So making 5,000 mock-ups of a new weapon, and then you know, making sure they hold up under scrutiny, that would be nonsensical.
And Ankit, as far as the missiles go, are they real? Are they mock-ups? What's your sense?
Yeah, there's a mixed history on this front. Most of the missiles we tend to see at parades are mock-ups, and you know, there are some bad mock-ups that we've seen. For instance, the KN-23, which was the new solid propellant short-range system that resembles the Russian Iskander-M. When that missile was first seen at a parade, and then eventually when it was tested, it looked quite different. The real tested version. So it's clear that there is a varying degree of the quality of mock-ups when it comes to missiles. You know, they've shown off ICBMs that have never been flight tested. We don't know if that's because the designs that they've shown just have inherent limitations, or whether it's because these were intended to be mock-ups from the get-go. But you know, as you said, I mean, there is also, from a deterrence perspective, a certain risk in showing up clearly mocked up things that you're not yet ready to operate or develop. In 2017, for instance, April, they showed off large canisters, implying that they would seek out solid propellant canisterized intercontinental range ballistic missiles. I might be speaking too soon because we maybe will see something similar at the end of this parade. We don't know yet. But at the time, at least, North Korea certainly didn't have those capabilities. But there is a value in that. It tells us programmatically the aspirations of this program, where they want to go. So that is helpful. Another point I'll just add on the conventional weapons. I mean, some folks have been wondering if North Korea's acquisition of a increasingly credible nuclear deterrent meant that it would cease investing or slow the pace of investment in conventional modernization. And I think this parade is very clear evidence that that's just not the case, that they continue to expand and modernize their conventional forces as well, demonstrating technological progress, not only with missile technology, but also with small arms and armor and things like that.
If you're just tuning in, this is a live cast of what Korea Central Television is broadcasting right now. It's pre-recorded from last night, but it's the first time anyone outside of North Korea is seeing this military parade. This is a video stream facilitated by NK News. We're a specialist North Korea-focused news publication, and NK Pro, which is our sister website that's dedicated to more government, military, NGO, business-focused information analysis and data. On that, Jongmin, anything else from the speech you think is worth drawing our attention to?
Before that, I have to clarify one part of what I commented before. Mr. David Maxwell of FDD pointed out that I said the South Korean government worker passed away. Sorry, I have to clarify that North Korean soldiers shot him and he was dead in the North Korean waters. On the United States, I think Kim Jong-un made two relevant points that may have been aiming at President Trump. One is COVID and two is sanctions. Although Kim Jong-un never mentioned Washington or President Trump by name, one thing was that he said, talking about COVID, Kim Jong-un said that he hopes that please everybody around the world stays healthy and happy. And that was a very similar messaging that he used when he personally wrote a letter to President Trump when he contracted COVID-19. Another thing was sanctions. He mentioned how although North Korea is not economically, they're not having a good economic situation right now. He is happy that nobody contracted COVID and they are like a happy family. And he did mention that because of long-term sanctions, on top of COVID-19 pandemic, North Korea is going through a lot. And Kim Jong-un said that North Korea is the only country in the world who has to go through something like this at the moment. And that is like a rerun of the plenary speech, again, when they were bracing for a long-term confrontation with the United States. So their rhetoric, although they are saying very, very low-key and not mentioning the United States by name, it seems that their policy line towards the United States hasn't really changed since December.
And I have a small factual correction, thanks to our colleague, Professor Sung-Yoon Lee, who's tuned in from the US. Earlier Ankit and I were talking about the Pukguksong 2 solid fuel missile, and Professor Lee points out that was actually tested February 12, 2017, just as Abe and Trump were having dinner in Washington. And it was actually the Hwasong 12 intermediate range ballistic missile test on May 14th, just as Xi Jinping was about to roll out the Belt and Road Initiative. Thank you very much for the correction on that. So we're seeing lots of new footage here of any sense of what these gas mask type things are for?
Yeah, these are units in full chemical warfare gear. They don't haven't before shown this during parades, so that's very interesting. The gas mask types are Russian PMK gas mask derived, but of indigenous production. We've seen them exported to Syria actually. They're showing us that they have significant capabilities in this regard indigenously as well. I'm not sure what you should make of them wearing during this parade, since most countries around the world are signatories of the Chemical Warfare Weapons Convention, except North Korea itself isn't. So the equipment they're wearing would most likely come in useful due to their own chemical weapons being used on the battlefield.
Thanks for that. And these are, I guess, Navy units coming through now?
Yeah, we've seen Navy units, we've seen Air Force units. These are more ceremonial elite forces we're seeing here, so officers presumably. There's mainly a mixture of units. But ahead of each unit, you can see they're generally holding the flag of the branch of the army, which is coming next. There's 5 branches nowadays: Army, Air Force, Navy, Strategic Forces, and Special Operations Forces. And all of them have been featured in recent years during parades.
Now, just for some context, so normally these parades are well known for being a small window of opportunity for foreign journalists like us to visit Pyongyang and observe what's going on from the ground. And one of the things that I've found most interesting about participating in these as a journalist is just the level of sheer security that takes place before the parade. So to give you some context, when we're in Pyongyang, we have no idea until the troops start rolling out that we're actually going to a parade. There's a lot of assumption, but the North Korean hosts always tell us there's just a special event. And it usually starts at about 3 a.m. in your hotel room. You'll receive a call from the reception desk, and they tell you to get up, go downstairs as soon as possible, and leave your cell phone, leave your lighters, so smokers can have some trouble there. And basically, we then have to go through a very intensive security check at the hotel, X-ray machines, bag inspections, you name it. That can take up to 4:30, 5 a.m. We then take a bus to the People's Palace of Culture, which is maybe about a 10-minute drive from the hotel they usually keep us at. And it's at that People's Palace of Culture that we go through yet again very significant security processes, more x-rays, more body searches, body pat-downs I should say. We have our cameras inspected, video cameras checked, and then onto another bus which will take us to Kim Il-sung Square. By that time we're getting in at about 7:30, 7 a.m. And again, you arrive there and there's often yet another security check. And it's at that point they might take your camera and try taking some photos to make sure it's a real camera. And what I found interesting about this process is, bear in mind, you've already gone through all of this security arriving in North Korea at the airport. And yet we still have all of this security one more time. The other thing is that when you're there around 7:30 a.m., if you look at the apartment blocks around you, you notice that there's no one looking out of their windows, waving. And in fact, having gone over lots of high-resolution photos that I've taken over the years at these 2 parades we were most recently attending, I actually believe that the North Koreans empty all the tower blocks in the vicinity of the parade area of all local residents before it happens, in order to ensure that there are no sharpshooters lurking in any of the upper floors. And for me, it's pretty incredible, because this is a country where ostensibly the leader has full support from the citizens, and yet there seems to be a degree of paranoia in the preparation of these parades that is quite off the scale in some ways. Another thing that takes place is that the cell phone network shuts down for 1 or 2 hours while the parade is taking place. And as a result of that, people can't make phone calls. And I think, again, it underscores the level of sensitivity around the whole event. Now, Ankit, do you remember back in May 2017, just a month after the 2017 parade, that the North Korean state media said that the CIA and NIS had tried to assassinate Kim Jong-un at the parade of April 15th, 2017. Do you remember that?
I do recall that, yes.
Yeah. So we believe that, I mean, this may be the background to the shutdown of the cell phone network and so on. I mean, everybody knows that the North Korean leader will be there on this day. Everyone knows that a lot of heavy technology will be coming through. So in some ways, it is a big security threat for the government. But I'm just curious if either of you have any, are these kind of things normal as far as we know from other parades, like in Iran or Russia?
It's difficult to say. I mean, I don't think at this level of scrutiny. I mean, everything you were describing about emptying out apartment blocks, those kinds of steps, I think, would be uniquely North Korean. I mean, given having said that, any kind of large public event anywhere with dignitaries present is going to present a unique set of security risks. So it's not surprising that North Korea does take this kind of thing really seriously. It has been interesting though that they. In 2017 when you were there, and I remember looking at your photographs, it was interesting to see very high resolution imagery coming to us of North Korean weapon systems via independent journalists, not through their state media, because usually we see what they would like us to see. And of course, that is something to keep in mind as we conduct analysis, that everything broadcast on KCTV, photographs coming through KCNA, those are all calibrated and carefully designed to show the outside world exactly what North Korea feels is useful to communicate deterrent messages or other messages. But yeah, I think it's unsurprising that they take security to the extremes that they do.
And another thing that we've seen last year in the wake of the Hanoi summit was what I've described as a kind of hyper-securitization through North Korea. This articulated in some really fascinating ways. Last October, for example, we obtained photos from sources in Pyongyang, initially of the Koryo Hotel, where most Westerners, Chinese will stay if they're on more expensive package tours of North Korea. And the first thing that was strange is we noticed that windows in the revolving restaurant and in some of the upper floor hotel rooms were frosted, and hotel guests started sharing with us more photos of neighboring buildings, and we saw these concrete slabs covering pretty much everything from the 15th floor upwards, but only facing in one direction. We subsequently got more photos from all over Pyongyang in very high resolution, and saw that this practice of covering up windows that face a certain direction is actually becoming extremely common late last year. And we even managed to get a photo of inside one of the apartments where these blocks or window shades have been added, and we actually saw that they're made of concrete. And it really raises questions. What are they worried about? What are they anxious about? We found out through geospatial analysis, looking at satellite imagery, that these windows all happen to be facing towards North Korea's so-called Forbidden City, which is where the political elite stay. And it was pretty shocking, to be honest, because people in those upper floor apartments in central Pyongyang are going to be relatively elite, and for them to have the Ministry of State Security suddenly come to their house and build concrete window shades, effectively making their bedrooms looking like prison cells. I mean, that's a really big deal when you think about it, and it raises questions again about what kind of concerns there are inside North Korea, that in the wake of the Hanoi summit, in the wake of these claims of CIA, NIS assassination attempts, what is it that they're so scared of? It was a very interesting thing. Another thing we noticed in the last year or so has been on state TV, lots and lots of pixelization and blurring of material in the background. And Anki, we've seen this on some missiles too, haven't we?
We have, yes. Censorship with missile imagery is something that is actually an important change pre-2017 and post. Pre-2017, when the goal of a lot of North Korean testing activity seemed to be to communicate the credibility of their strategic deterrent. They would show us really, I remember their ICBM tests would come with image sets of around 40 images from KCNA. But lately, the 2019 and 2020 testing campaigns, especially 2019, we saw some very unusual unusual censorship, including blurring of missile canisters and parts of the transporter erector launchers. Obviously, I think with the parade footage that we're about to see, a lot of that should be seen entirely without any censorship involved. But it was a curious choice to limit our ability to analyze those components of those systems.
Yeah, I mean, you say we're unlikely to see it. I mean, it seems to me it could still be a question mark. Is there a possibility that we'll see pixelation or blurring? I mean, we know this has been through a pretty extensive post-production editing process. Do you think there's any chance we'll see new systems being blurred or pixelated, or that's unlikely?
I would say it's unlikely, although it's always possible. There's always a first time to developments like that. But I think the North Koreans at the parade, at least, would want to showcase many of these systems in their full glory. It's unclear why exactly they decided that they needed to censor those systems. Either there was something related to development or where certain components have been procured that they didn't want us to see. But they might be able to obscure those in other ways with physical modifications for a parade, for instance.
Now, we're seeing the pilots getting aboard their aircraft. Tell us about these planes. What are they useful for? How would they fare in combat with South Korea, with Japan? Tell us, share your thoughts.
Yeah, so these are the basically the most modern aircraft which North Korea has to offer. They're MiG-29s. They are formerly Soviet. They are fighter aircraft, which during the Cold War were sort of seen as the opponent for the F-16. Nowadays we know that in capabilities they actually fall quite short of that. North Korea was often reported to have received like 40 of them, but in reality the number is around 12, 3 of which are of a slightly more modern variant. Here they've equipped them with all types of neon lights for the parade, so they are better visible at night. We saw some new painting applied to the sides of the cockpits, possibly indicating that they're part of like an aerobatics team, as far as that's possible when you only have 12 of these aircraft. To be entirely honest, this is the best North Korea has on offer. It's entirely likely that if a war breaks out, they'll be shot down in very short notice. But they are used for quick reaction duty, where a couple of these aircraft are on the tarmac on all 8 times, and if their airspace is breached or threatened, in the past they've sent them out quickly to intercept.
And we got 7 right now flying in formation. How many did you say total?
Yeah, this is quite a high number. I think the highest number I've seen in the air at one time was 6 up until this point, and they have like 12 in total. So you're basically seeing over half the entire North Korean MiG-29 fleet.
And just on the right there seems to be, I think I can see a plane without the luminescent lights. You can see some, maybe it's a camera crew flying behind.
Yeah, may well be. I can imagine.
So it looks like fireworks going off from the aircraft itself.
Yeah, fireworks or simply flares. In wartime, flares are used, of course, to divert anti-air defenses and air-to-air missiles, so that the aircraft itself doesn't get hit. Fireworks like this are very, very common during North Korean parades. Typically from their older, slower aircraft, though, because that makes for a prettier image.
Do you think we're going to see the something fascinating about this? We're seeing a lot of aerial footage from the planes themselves. I mean, this is very new. We've never ever seen this before. Pretty incredible that they've been able to pull this off. I mean, if this was being, what do we see here? Is this the Antonov biplanes?
Yeah, I suspect it is. As far as I can tell by the outline, these are the ancient Antonov 2 airplanes, of which North Korea has an absolutely vast fleet, and which it typically uses during its parades to, ride out symbols in the sky, like the Workers' Party symbol here. They also use other old aircraft like the Chinese and Soviet Yak-18 CJ5. Those are like Korean War era aircraft, which they still operate. Not just for this purpose, but also for wartime purposes, actually.
Now, some laugh about these biplanes. I mean, they are decades old, but they, if I understand correctly, they do actually have some rather surprising stealth qualities.
Well, I wouldn't talk about stealth qualities per se. Those, like some people say, they're partly made of wood, which isn't true, and that would give them stealth properties for some reason. But they have been outfitted in many cases with like terrain following radars, which allow you to fly very low over the ground, so that radars won't pick up your signature until very late. And they have, if I remember correctly, like 300 of these aircraft, most modernized in surface, whose sole purpose is to insert special forces behind South Korean lines. You're going to see a very high attrition rate amongst these aircraft, of course, but some are bound to get through, and especially given the modifications which are meant to ensure that they actually get to their targets in the south. It's a dubious tactic, but it might pay off for them in a wartime.
And these aircraft we're seeing now, they look a bit faster, right?
And yeah, I can't really spot what these seem to be. They might be the Sukhois, which we saw earlier, by the fact that they're presumably jets, so another 7 Sukhoi 25s, I think. Yes, would seem to be the case. And they're not usually this smoky, I should say. So it's possible that they've injected something to create these pretty smoke lines in the sky.
No, there's a nice bit of follow-up here, given that Kim Jong-un did visit Suncheon Air Force Base, where these aircraft are based earlier this year in March. So it's interesting to see these aircraft so prominently featured at the parade.
And of course, Ankit, that was one of his last appearances before going missing, right, for quite some time.
Exactly, right. Oh, here we go. We have some anti-tank guided missiles coming up, looks like.
Yeah, these are actually very interesting systems, those anti-tank missiles. We saw them for the first time during the September 28 parade, 2018. And they haven't been tested yet, as far as we can tell. But it seems like these may be like a spike and loss equivalent. We know China operates such systems. These are missiles that can be fired and then flown over the horizon and then hit targets like as far as 10 kilometers away. This is speculation, of course, at this point, but it would seem to be the case. Also, these vehicles which we're seeing now, which are based on their indigenous 8x8 APC chassis, they are also new ATGM carriers. I would think these are the North Korean equivalent of the Russian Kornet, which is a very capable anti-tank missile system, which we've seen introduced in the last few years. This 8x8 APC just coming into the shot right now is also entirely new. It has a anti-tank gun mounted to the turret, which seems to be based on the D30, but heavily modified. So this is a very mobile and interesting anti-tank platform, like we've seen Russia develop during the latter stages of the Cold War as well. I should also keep on commenting because a lot of new stuff coming by. These tanks, which we're seeing now, main battle tanks, they are entirely new as far as I can tell. North Korea operates basically two 3 tank lines, 2 of which are of Soviet heritage, the T-55 and the T-62, which has been very much upgraded. And starting around 2009, they introduced the Sungun tank. But these tanks over here are of an entirely new caliber. We're seeing angled armor, which suggests the turret is welded and presumably of composite armor. We're seeing the anti-tank missiles mounted to the sides instead of in bulky, awkward attachments. I'm seeing smoke grenade dischargers hidden away in the design in a manner consistent with the new Russian T-14 Armada. So they're possibly trying to mirror the aesthetics of that. The guns that are rolling into screen now are artillery, which was first shown in the 2018 parades as well. Those are entirely new self-propelled guns that they've suddenly been introducing. And yeah, you see it here on the sides. I think we'd already figured that they are probably of a 155 millimeter caliber, which is very significant because that's actually a Western caliber. So that suggests some transfer of technology, possibly from China or an export variant made by Russia of their artillery. A lot of very new developments here. These are some more classic multiple launch rocket systems, the 240 millimeter rockets, which they have a lot of. They have a very large range, up to like 60 kilometers in their newest variant. These systems are dreaded because they can be upgraded to have GPS guidance and therefore strike targets in the south with pretty large warheads and pretty accurately. And the cabs on these vehicles, as you can see, are quite armored as well. And that's a new development too. Since around 2017, they've been armoring their vehicles more extensively, making them shrapnel resistant. More of the 240 millimeter rocket launchers, this time 12 tubes. And here are some of the far longer ranged, almost strategic systems. These are of, we think, 600 millimeter. They tested a slew of them a year or two ago. These have a very long range and are 2 GPS guided. There's really no other country in the world that operates a multiple rocket system that is equivalent. We're already seeing in the distance new transporters that carry even 5 of these missiles at a time, and so those are new to this parade as well. We've so far only seen a transporter that carries 4 and then one that carries 6, which I believe we're going to see next.
Yeah, that's the KN-25 program that Kim Jong-un has been very pleased with in particular, given the recent slate of promotions for Ri Pyeong-chul. He was very much instrumental in overseeing this program. And I believe at one of the tests, he specifically commented that this system was designed by a younger generation of North Korean weapons designers, and that Kim was particularly pleased with that. It is interesting to see the various launcher configurations, though. Notice we have tracked launchers here, better equipped for off-road operations in North Korea. Definitely an interesting array of systems going through here.
Yeah, and North Korea actually has some difficulty in producing these transporters. And the chassis you're seeing here is produced at the same factory that produces their main battle tanks. And that's part of the reason why we're thinking they probably had to suspend their main battle tank production for some time to allow for new transporter erector launchers for all of these ballistic missile systems. So this transporter we're seeing here, truck-based, is entirely new. It carries 5 missiles, 5 of the 600 millimeter missiles instead of 4 or 6. And the advantage, of course, of wheels is faster transportation across roads, whereas a tracked chassis may be more convenient when you want to hide your abilities in rough terrain. So North Korea investing in both is significant. I think this really ensures a very extensive striking capacity for them, especially since we're seeing so many of these systems now.
Is this the Kumsong 3 surface-to ship?
This is the Coastal Defense Cruise Missile, the Kumsong 3 variant, known to the U.S. as the KN-19. This was initially paraded in April 2017 and then tested later that year. It's thought to have a fairly capable upgraded seeker multimodal. North Korea recently also conducted a test of this system off their east coast.
Yeah, it even has in newest tests we've even seen it has like waypoint abilities, so you can fire a bunch of these missiles, have them hover around in the sky, and then strike all at once. And
what's this? What's this?
This looks like Pukguksong 3 submarine launched ballistic missile, which I'm actually quite pleased to see at the parade.
4. It says Pukguksong 4A.
Okay, so this is interesting.
This is interesting.
Seems to, yeah.
4A on the cover.
4A.
Yeah, 4A it seemed. They hadn't really confirmed to us whether or not this was the Pukguksong 3 or some new development. It was mainly assumed that was the case because they hadn't really shown us the Pukguksong 3. But this may be, they have 2 new SLBM capable platforms under development, and both may be carrying different types of missiles, so that may explain that. What we're seeing now is also highly significant because this, this is a new air defense system. It's never before been shown. The radars are unlike anything North Korea has been shown before, and it seems extremely comparable to the Russian Tor missile defense system, which we did not know North Korea operated. This fills a very specific gap in their air defense capabilities, which must have been, one of the biggest lacking points in North Korean air defense capabilities. Honestly, I'm not quite sure where they could have sourced this technology. You could make the case that they got it before the sanctions era from Russia, but I would deem that somewhat unlikely. These carriers we're seeing here are new carriers for the Pongai 5, which is like or possibly even the Pongai 6, which they hinted at having some before. They are equivalents of the Russian S-300 missile defense systems. We've seen those tested before, but never on these trucks.
That's right. And here we appear to have the return of the Pukguksong 2, the older SLBM on land, the medium-range ballistic missile first tested in February 2017. I'm again curious to see how many launchers we have. I will be interested to return to the Pukguksong 4A because that is a materially new capability that North Korea has not hinted at, so that was quite interesting to see.
So we got 1, 2.
1, 2 up so far.
Yeah, 1, 2, 4A, I suppose, and they only showed us some blurry propaganda images of what seemed to be a tree somewhere, but we don't know if that's actually been introduced.
Right.
And presumably the big ICBM.
That looks like 4,
type.
I think. Yeah, 4.
Oh,
4.
yeah, sorry, you're counting the tells, yeah. If it's 6, that would correspond to previous parade.
This looks like some KN-23s approaching. The short-range ballistic missile first tested in 2019, first paraded in February 2018.
It's a lot of equipment.
It really is. We didn't get a good look at the number of Pukguksong 2 tells, but perhaps they'll be in the frame soon.
I might be mistaken here, but these air defense systems, those canisters are looking too long to be S-300 missiles. They, for a very long time, hinted at potentially a new air defense system, the Pongai 6, which would be some new advancement. That may be what we're looking at here, though just judging by canisters, of course, it's difficult to be sure.
I agree. Those canisters do look too long for the KN-06 Pongai 5.
Yeah, that would be a very significant development, given that they haven't really developed any new anti-aircraft systems that we knew of up until this point. So they would have very clandestinely gone about this. If you know a system, if you've been able to analyze it for years, as in the case of Russian S-300, it's also far easier to combat the system because you can know what its weak points are. In the North Korean case, there's often so many question marks that really complicates the picture.
Right, and we should clarify to viewers that a lot of these very first impressions are subject to review. A lot of the times, the first view of a parade leads to assessments that require updating as more information becomes available.
Yeah, just for context,
Yeah,
we were requested by a very smart reader of the website to do this sports style commentary, and yeah, so this live kind of commentary is new for all of us, but we hope you are appreciating it.
I do wonder if they have set aside the Pukguksong 3. It saw a single test and no return, and now we see a Pukguksong 4A. So it is possible that was a small intermediary developmental step onto a US LBM.
Yeah, so these transporter reactor launchers haven't featured yet in parades either, but this is the tracked equivalent of those Iskander-like missiles. I should really mention Iskander-like instead of Iskander-derived missiles that we saw earlier.
So many questions coming to mind. How did they get the equipment for this? How did the North Koreans get the finance? Where did they get the technology? It's really pretty impressive, I'd say, from where we've seen previous parades.
Yeah.
These look like the canisters for the KN-24, which is another short-range ballistic missile first seen in 2019 that externally resembles the U.S. Army ATACMS short-range ballistic missile system.
Yeah, it should be mentioned though that it's a fair size larger. Like the ATACMS is a tactical
larger
system, and this really is a ballistic missile. So these transporter erector launchers are absolutely huge. It may not come across as such on screen, but standing beside them, yeah, they overtake you quite.
Is this the Hwasong 12 coming through?
Yeah,
that is
yes, they
the
are.
Hwasong 12 intermediate range ballistic missile.
Yeah, staple of past parades of the previous few years.
Tested.
These are,
It was tested 6 times in 2017, 3 times in April, first time successfully in May 2017, and then tested once in August over Japan, and then tested again in September over Japan. It's the North Korean missile to have demonstrated the longest flight range of any missile. I believe their final test in September 2017 demonstrated a range capable of striking Guam, I believe in excess of 3,500 kilometers from North Korea in the northern Pacific.
Yeah, should be mentioned though that these are all liquid fueled as opposed to the solid fueled which we saw earlier. So that really complicates. You have to fuel these missiles with corrosive fuels right before launch, and that takes time, and it makes it easier to find them. And
These
Hwasong
12s they keep rolling, if I'm not mistaken. We've just seen more. What?
Yes, we have. They're all using, these are the modified Musudan TELs that North Korea imported from Belarus that they have a limited number of, but they're using them to carry the Hwasong 12. Here we have Hwasong
the Hwasong 15. Counting the transporters of this is really important. We've all been speculating there could be an increase here.
Right.
Looks like 4 so far. Ankit?
I see 4.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't really think. I don't think they have a production capability for vehicles of this size yet. These vehicles which we're seeing are 9-axle, massive 9-axle vehicles. They're based on a Chinese transporter erector launcher, which they imported somewhere in the previous decade, and I think they only have like 8 of them.
I believe 6.
Yeah, something like that. They were
imported from China with falsified end-user licensing for forestry applications in North Korea. But of course, forestry turned out to be a different kind of activity in the end.
Yeah.
But these are heavily modified. I think I see 4. We haven't gotten a good shot. that lets us assess the full line.
So yeah, that means they haven't figured out the mass production of these transporter erector launchers as Kim Jong-un was hoping for, it seems.
They may have mobile erector launchers that are towed. There does appear to be something behind the Hwasong 15.
That does seem to be a new type of long-range missile.
Yeah, remember, we're all looking for a new strategic weapon, as Kim Jong-un hinted at in December 2019, so...
People look like they're anticipating something, and here it comes.
Yeah.
Okay, so these do use the same transporters, but
How
they
many
are
axles
new
is
missiles.
that? That's a much larger missile.
Yeah,
And four of them,
counted
at least.
9
Yeah.
on my first.
Yes.
I thought I counted 9 axles, but the cab is new. Of course, they do that every time to accommodate the warhead of the missile. Yeah. Oh no, it's 10 axle. Wait, is it? It's 11 axle.
11
Jesus.
axle. That's
Wow.
huge.
These are absolutely massive. These are the largest road mobile ICBMs I think to have ever been built, presumably.
Largest road mobile liquid fuel missile, certainly. That does appear to be
Yeah.
a liquid propellant-based system. An enlarged or extended Hwasong 15, it appears.
Yeah, these are absolutely massive. And I wouldn't really hazard to guess on whether these are still modified Chinese transporter erector launchers, or whether they actually did manage to produce them themselves at this point.
This
Yeah,
actually
could-
appears that it might be based on the Maz Musudan Tel that's been extended and merged with another one, which is an interesting possibility. But again, this is a very early assessment. We need to look at these pictures much more closely.
Yeah, I think you can see by the wheel caps on these vehicles, you can see which wheels are driven and which are not, and that's how we could clearly figure out that the previous Hwasong 15 TELs were based on the Chinese chassis, and I'm seeing a similar pattern here. Some of these wheel caps seem indented, and that seems consistent with like the WS 51200.
Yeah. Unfortunately, in focusing on the system itself, I haven't been keeping count of the actual number of TELs we've seen so far, but I counted 4 of both the Hwasong 15 and this new system.
Yeah.
So that would mean they've used all. If these are variants of the Chinese logging vehicles, that's showing their full 8. And we know normally that the North Koreans have a reserve of everything coming in case there's a breakdown. So I guess it's still inconclusive as to whether or not they have cracked this nut of TEL production.
Yeah, the problem is the cab on the new integrated transporter erector launcher for the new massive ICBM appears quite different from the Wanshan 51-200 based TEL that they've used for the Hwasong 14 and Hwasong 15. So I would want to take a closer look at that. But it is possible that this is a different design derived from a different base vehicle.
And we're now seeing Kim Jong-un walking away from the parade stand, which would suggest that the usual parade of floats, the civilian parade that we normally see after the military aspect, may not actually be included. We always look out at this aspect of the parade to determine whether or not there are new propaganda messages. We've seen, for example, in 2017 April parade, a lot of floats referencing North Korea's so-called Byungjin policy of developing nuclear and nuclear weapons capabilities in the economy simultaneously. So that we may be absent some clues, at least in the civilian propaganda, as to where things are going from here.
세상이 열백번 변해 방해하는 최고 용도자 동지와 매중종 핏줄처럼 간직하고 영원히 충성의 한계를 가고 갈 천만 군민의 신념과 의지 용암마냥 끌어번지고 있습니다. 이 세상 그 어디에서도 찾아볼 수 없는 열광의 이 화폭이야말로 위대한 혼연일체의 장엄한 시이며 김정은 조선의 영원한 모습입니다. 온 행성이 오쟁 광풍과 참혹한 국난으로 신음해도 조선은 왜 끄떡없으며 우리의 전쟁과 승리 장창한 앞날이 무엇으로 하여 억적으로 담보되는가를 힘있게 과시한 크나큰 긍지와 자부심으로 경축광장은 끝없이 설레고 있습니다.
So, Ankit, just a few words and use any ideas on, like, we see a new missile like this on 11 axles. This could be one of the largest ICBMs in the world, theoretically. What does that mean? Why would they need a larger missile than the Hwasong 15, which already we understand could even reach Cuba from, according to some estimates, for if launched from Pyongyang?
Yeah, so the Hwasong 15 certainly demonstrated that range wasn't really an issue for North Korea, but the logic here with going larger is basically increasing the amount that the payload can accommodate for the missile at similar ranges. So a larger missile will always carry a larger payload to a given target. So if North Korea wants to pursue things like multiple reentry vehicles or even more sophisticated penetration aids, which might assist North Korean reentry vehicles in defeating missile defense systems, a larger missile can be much useful. We don't know what's under the hood of this missile yet. It is using a shroud. We don't know if it has multiple warheads, although it certainly is sized to accommodate multiple warheads. It does appear to be based on the Hwasong 15 with an extended second stage, I would say, based on a preliminary analysis. So it is quite likely that this might include a multiple reentry vehicle capability, although we really won't know that until we either get more information from North Korea directly or we see this tested, which is a possibility certainly early next year if North Korea wants to send a message either to a new U.S. administration or to a second term of the Trump administration.
And of course, we have, sorry, Joost.
Oh yeah, sorry. I just want to interject to mention that these would be presumably like the largest road mobile ICBMs. Of course, you have silo-based ICBMs, which range even far larger in size. But North Korean capabilities in that regard are extremely poorly understood. As far as we can tell, they probably don't operate them, but perhaps they do. But yeah, largest road mobile ICBMs, as far as I can tell at this point.
Yeah, it might be anywhere. And the North Koreans have a unique tendency to, no country has deployed liquid propellant strategic missiles like North Korea has. Countries that deploy liquid propellant ICBMs tend to prefer them to remain in silos for ease of handling. But North Korea continues to show us that they keep going larger and larger. So I would say the two big takeaways are this new strategic weapon that we saw at the end of the parade and the Pukguksong 4A implying continued solid propellant progress. Those are the two that really stood out to me for at least as far as the strategic forces are concerned.
Now, I've got a few more questions for you both, and Jongmin, my colleague sitting next to me. But just a reminder, for those of you tuning in, we are watching the end credits right now. This is an NK News remix, if you will, of the parade with live commentary from NK Pro contributors, including Ankit Panda and Joost Ollemans of Oryx, both of whom will be providing text-based analysis for NK Pro within the next 24 hours, really breaking down everything we have seen. And Jongmin Kim, as I said, is my colleague who's been here, a Seoul correspondent, sharing translations and views from South Korea. And on that, I just want to go back to you, Ankit. We did see 2 engine tests in December last year. Tell us about the length of the engine burn time and what that might mean for these new Hwasong 16 ICBMs. I don't know what we will call them, but what's your sense on that?
Yes, I mean, first of all, presumably this would be the Hwasong 16. It certainly bears many of the characteristics of the Hwasong 12, Hwasong 14, Hwasong 15 design aesthetic appears to be based on the Hwasong 15. So we did see, shortly before Kim Jong-un at his speech at the 5th plenary of the 7th Central Committee of the Workers' Party made reference to a new strategic weapon. We saw 2 engine tests at the liquid propellant engine static test stand at Sohae, overseen by the Academy of National Defense Science of North Korea. No images were released, very little information was released, but both tests were described as important. One of the tests had a very long engine burn time, much longer than what would be necessary for a conventional stage in a liquid propellant ICBM. We had a few theories about why that might have been the case. There has been a big focus on reliability in North Korean language and talking about strategic forces. Not only does North Korea care about demonstrating certain capabilities, but it wants to signal that its deterrent is reliable. So it is possible that North Korea was testing the engine that is really at the foundation of these systems, the Soviet-derived RD-250 variant liquid propellant engine that they first tested in March 2017. They may have been testing that engine for a longer burn time to see if certain indigenously manufactured components were holding up to the task. It is also possible that they have introduced a all-new second stage, given that I do have questions about what engine is driving the potential second stage of this ICBM. There is a small possibility that North Korea could be using mixed stages with a solid propellant second stage. But again, this is very speculative. We need much closer analysis to make any kind of definitive assessment. But yes, I think this new strategic weapon and those engine tests very likely were related, given that it certainly was a liquid propellant test. North Korea does not conduct solid propellant engine tests at Sohae. And now we've just seen a new large liquid propellant system. So I think putting 2 and 2 together, those do appear to be related.
Joost, if you were a military planner in South Korea or the United States, what would be concerning you most right now about what we've just seen?
I think we've seen a lot of concerning developments on all fronts, really. The personal equipment of KPA soldiers, it just enhances their war fighting capability in general, and thus far the South Koreans could rely on an extensive advantage in this field. I think the North Koreans are trying to close this gap with body armor, etc. But those new long-range anti-tank systems, those can be extremely damaging. We've seen in recent conflicts that large ATGM capabilities translate into high armor losses on the other opposing side. Those new main battle tanks, we don't know how well their production of those is. That will probably need to ramp it up in the future. They could pose a threat to especially older generations of South Korean tanks, of which they have many. The anti-aircraft defense systems they've shown, that could be very concerning. It shows they actually do have the ability to introduce modern systems. Whereas the consensus until now had been that at least their deployment of those is very limited, and their introduction of new capabilities is very limited. And of course, those tactical and strategic missile systems, they seem to be investing extremely high amounts of resources in those. So all those 600mm rockets which we saw, which are capable of striking nearly the entirety of South Korea, those would all be a grave threat. I just checked. I think you were correct in saying that the transporter erector launcher of those ICBMs, that they only received 6 of those from China. So that would indeed also indicate they finally mastered some indigenous production of large TELs. Really a pretty big industrial feat for a nation which is crippling. Has a economy that's been crippled by years of mismanagement and sanctions.
And just on that, to give some listeners perspective, Dr. Andrei Lankov, a professor who lived in North Korea and is one of our regular contributors. I mean, he often likens North Korea's economy to that of Mozambique. They fall in a similar place in world rankings in terms of economic power. And I mean, that really goes to show how poor the country is, and yet it's somehow able to accomplish significant developments in a wide range of military areas, putting satellites into orbit, you name it. Jongmin, how do you think the South Korean president is going to be reacting to this today, given his drive for peace with North Korea at the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics just 2 years ago?
I saw in a lot of the comments whether or not Moon Jae-in or Trump will take these development in North Korean weaponry as provocation. A lot of people were talking about October surprise and whether or not North Korea will make provocative movements before U.S. presidential election. But to Moon, I think, and actually to anybody, provocation, I think it depends on how they want to view it. So because Moon was continuing his pro-engagement movement despite everything that was going on, the military part of the parade itself wouldn't be that much of a glitch to whatever Moon Jae-in administration was pushing forward for. One thing that really struck my mind was when Kim Jong-un talked about South Korea very directly. It's been a long time since Kim Jong-un personally said anything very nice about South Korea. Since the failure of Hanoi summit, the relations soured between the two Koreas as well, and the escalation of tension. It led to the North Korean statements even talking about dropping out of inter-Korean agreements after losing faith in what South Korea can actually do. But today, Kim Jong-un actually directly mentioned that he is looking forward for that day when South Korea and North Korea can hold hands again. And that's a very symbolic message to Moon Jae-in administration because they were actually holding hands on Baekdu, right? And these Minjok thing, these Korean people thing, the symbolic messaging, I think it was very much intended, and how Kim Jong-un framed it as a warm greeting about COVID-19 prevention measures. I think it sort of signals that maybe inter-Korean engagement and cooperation may start at one point in the close future as well, because Moon will take this as a signal for North Korea wanting to engage with South Korea as well.
Yeah, and I mean, just personally speaking, I do think this is significant effort and show that we've just seen, and it is going to forcefully remind whoever will become the next president of the United States in November that this issue remains unresolved. And if it is left to the Barack Obama era policy of strategic patience, North Korea has showed us it has a playing card right now, which could result in very significant and worrying testing. We've also heard, of course, in recent years, North Korea talking about testing into the Pacific Ocean. All those things, any new US president, or if President Trump is reelected, will probably want to avoid. With that, as we wrap up, I'd love to hear some final thoughts. Ankit, how about you? Let's hear your concluding analysis.
Yeah, no, I think just to reiterate the point that you made, I mean, the Singapore Declaration, where Kim Jong-un signed his name onto a piece of paper saying that he would work towards the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. I think tonight's parade just tells us, I mean, how far we've come just since that summit, and North Korea very much continues to show progress despite all measures taken by the international community to stymie its economy. It remains committed to nuclear weapons as the cornerstone of its national defense, and of course, that's not to underemphasize the new conventional weapons we've seen, but really, I think the big picture here is that North Korea's nuclear forces continue to grow. I mean, this is the 5th ICBM design that we've seen North Korea parade through Kim Il-sung Square, and I think it's quite likely that this one is slated for testing, unlike the first 2 ICBM designs that they showed off in parades. So it looks like the the Hwasong 14, Hwasong 15, and now apparently what may be the Hwasong 16 are going to be the topic of conversation for weeks and months to come.
Joost, what's your assessment overall?
Another one of those North Korean parades that, from an analyst point of view, it leaves you stunned for a while. So many new systems. there's really a lot of analysis ahead to try and figure out how much of these represent immediate improvements in technology, how much of these are just tentative and they'll try to get under control in the near future, and in what numbers. And if you're trying to figure out where they may have procured this technology, you can always find some lineage of weapon systems to other countries. Perhaps there's been sanctions violations. We've got a lot of stuff to figure out here.
Indeed, we do. Jung-min, any final thoughts?
Overall, to me, it seemed that North Korea, Kim Jong-un especially, a lot of it was for domestic message. I think the message was like, we were going through a lot, but we have we are overcoming that, and despite all of what happened, we have developed these missiles. One thing that stood out to me is that they didn't really mention Pyongyang General Hospital, which was due October 10th, unless I missed anything. But sometimes these construction projects, they are quietly delayed or are finished a little bit afterwards. So we will have to keep an eye on that. Also, I think a lot of language that Kim Jong-un used, it pointed to how they will be gearing up whatever resource they have for the January Party Congress. In the January Party Congress next year, they will be announcing a new 5-year economic plan. So if we have a chance, if we can do something like this again, it will be very interesting to see how they will frame it, because this time it was quite convenient because they had COVID-19 to blame and flood to blame and typhoon to blame. But if they cannot come up with any solid achievements by January, it will be really hard for them to say anything, especially during the New Year's address, if they do anything like that. My final thought is that I'll become very busy. I'm an inter-Korea relations beat reporter, and to me, it seems that a lot of inter-Korean attempts for inter-Korean cooperation, we will see a lot of them in the coming weeks or months. I think Moon will be in a very big dilemma because domestically, a lot of opposition party lawmakers, they're criticizing South Korean administration for being too soft with recent North Korean behaviors. But from Moon Jae-in's perspective, this was a definite olive branch coming from Kim Jong-un. So we'll have to see how it pans out.
I just, thanks all for your comments. I all of this just brings me back to Kim Yo-jong, Kim Jong-un's sister, who she was commenting about the U.S. Independence Day celebrations back in July, earlier this year. Thinking about it now with the hindsight that we have, it almost seemed like it was sarcastic. We all know President Trump was trying to have a military parade at some point, and she was commenting in that letter to President Trump in her remarks, stating that it would be lovely for him to send a DVD so they could check the US fireworks display. And it really does look tonight or last night like the North Koreans have far eclipsed any US Independence Day celebration I've ever seen. We've seen far more military equipment revealed today than any other parade in DPRK history, and I think this one is going to go down in the history books. On that, I would like to draw a close to this NK News, NK Pro live commentated videocast. I want to thank Ankit, Jung-min, and Yust especially for all your great commentary. If you are not a subscriber of NK News, sign into the website tomorrow, join. It doesn't cost much, just a few dollars a week for a standard NK News subscription, and you'll be able to read some of our analysis on this. I want to say a massive thanks to Nils Weissensai, who has devised all the technology for today. It's worked a treat, I think. We couldn't have done it without him. Also want to thank Collins Verco, Michelle Choi, and our editor, Kelly Kasulis, all of whom have been working hard today to help with coverage. And last but not least, I want to thank my wife, Julia Jung-min, for all the support, and our new baby Leia. I know I've not been here today, but I hope you understand why. Lots of love. All right, on that, I just want to wrap up and say thanks everyone for tuning in. And we will be back maybe in Pyongyang next time. Okay, with that, thanks everybody.